If you're looking for Borderlands 3 services, items, or power leveling fast and safe, make sure to check out easynpc.com and use my coupon code NICK2 for 5% off your first purchase, link in the description. Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I'm going to be showing you guys what I believe to be the best Amara build, not only for leveling, but is also fantastic when you get to endgame. This build is mainly going to be for mobbing, and is overall a very strong build as you can see in the gameplay here. It pretty much just focuses on getting as much elemental damage and just damage in general as humanly possible, and then being able to just murder groups of enemies pretty efficiently by using your face cast ability and a couple other abilities that synergize very well with it. I know that melee Amara is another really strong build, but while you're leveling, I would not recommend going for melee Amara as it is very reliant on a lot of perks that you can't get till later on. But obviously, even at endgame, this build is very, very good, and I still think it is stronger than melee Amara. But I did just want to mention that that was a good alternative. So, getting into everything. First off, the first thing you're going to notice and grill me for is the fact that I don't have a 4th weapon slot and I don't have a relic. Trust me, I have done plenty of testing on Amara. The thing is that this is my 4th level 50, and I'm not trying to do the story over again. I just want to get the build out there. I've done plenty of testing on Mayhem 3 by joining other people's lobbies. I just currently don't have a relic, which isn't a huge difference in damage. Obviously, I would be doing significantly more damage if I had a relic, but as you saw in the gameplay, the damage is obviously very strong, so it would be even better if I were to have a relic. I just wasn't trying to do the story for 7 hours again just so that I could get this video out for you guys. I will do that in a bit, but I've done it 4 times already, and I just don't want to do it again right now. So just like my other videos, we're pretty much just going to start off with a completely empty slate, and then I'm just going to go over the order in which I think is going to give you the best potential, I guess, early on, so that leveling is much easier for you, and then of course you'll have a finished build towards the end of it. As I stated before, I am going primarily for just 100% damage. You do get a lot of survivability out of this one talent, which gives you lifesteal whenever you do elemental damage. More about that later. I would like to mention though that if you are having problems with survivability, or you just like general movement speed, you can go a little bit into this tree and gain some damage reduction. You can gain some additional max health. You can gain some extra damage reduction here and movement speed. I just personally avoid this tree because it's not going to help you out in terms of doing extra damage, but if you want more damage resistance, you can go into that tree. Normally, that's only going to help you though while leveling, because when you're at endgame, you have more than enough survivability with a few other talents that we're going to be speccing into. But again, if you're leveling up, this could easily be pretty strong for you if you're realizing that you're taking a lot of damage, or you just want to run around super fast with this talent Vigor. Obviously though, the configuration that I'm going for, in my opinion, is the best. So this build is going to be pretty much completely focused around the ability Phase Grasp, and then you're going to be using some augments that work very well with it. So obviously we're going to want to start off with using Phase Grasp. So the most impactful talent early on, we are going to start off with this tree, but I think the most impactful talent early on is actually getting 3 of Personal Space, which is going to do 36% additional bonus damage the closer you are to your target. So if you make sure that you're closer to your target, more often than not, you're going to just be doing a free, pretty substantial amount of additional damage. So definitely would recommend going for that early on. And the next thing we're going to go for is Anima. This is pretty much just going to make your status effect damage significantly higher, and it's going to make it last longer. Your status effects, if you don't already know, are pretty much just the chance of your gun doing additional elemental damage. This is particularly strong on guns that have very high per second damage potential, such as this one, giving you 3,000 or nearly 3,000 damage per second with a chance here. Obviously, since you're playing Amara, you're pretty much only going to be wanting to use elemental guns because of how much elemental damage you're stacking, which of course is compounded by Tempest here. Amara deals increased elemental damage, and shock damage is further increased. So early on, it would be in your benefit to use a shock weapon because you're literally getting a total of 50% extra damage from this talent. This talent is really, really big early on. Next thing I'd go into is Dread. Amara's gun damage is increased for a few seconds after an enemy is grasped. Whenever a player kills a grasped enemy, your weapon is instantly reloaded. This is really good because whenever an enemy is grasped, you'll end up pretty much just killing them. They're going to be your priority target for a few reasons, which we'll get into in a minute. But this is very good because instantly reloading your gun is awesome and giving you 15% gun damage, which is up pretty much all of the time because of the cooldown reset on your Phase Grasp. you're getting free gun damage very frequently. So obviously now we run into the problem where we're trying to get further down here, but we don't know what to spec into. I would spec into steady hands. This reduces or it increases the accuracy and the handling of your guns. You wouldn't think that this is all that great, but on a weapon like this, it actually reduces the bloom by a significant amount. As you can see, the reticle is bloomed outwards. Without this talent, the bloom is massive. Same thing on this shotgun. The bloom is absolutely huge without this talent. So definitely I would recommend going into this. It doesn't seem like it's very good, but trust me, getting extra accuracy while you're hip firing, stuff like that, is a huge DPS increase because obviously you're going to end up hitting more bullets. More bullets you're hitting, more damage. So now we need to spec 2 more in to get down here. Infusion, I don't think is worth going for because all it's doing is it's going to make your action skill, being phase grasp, do a portion of your damage with your gun. But this is only going to work on enemies that are immune to phase grasp. This is something that I learned in testing. If you just phase grasp an enemy, phase grasp itself doesn't do any damage by itself. It only does damage in the form of augments later, but increasing its inherent damage doesn't actually do anything because by itself it does not do any damage unless you're grasping an immune target such as a boss. So anything that is going to give you damage or your action skill or your phase grasp, such as this, converting some of your damage into an action skill element, in my opinion is useless. Against bosses it could be okay, but I really think that you have enough damage as is, and more often than not, you're not really fighting bosses, so it's much more beneficial to go into other things that are just going to give you overall extra damage. I avoid this one. Amara gains increased melee damage, and her melee damage is converted to her action skill element. We never really melee with this setup, so we're just going to be ignoring this. What we're going to go into is Wildfire. Only 1 point so far. We end up going into a little bit more in a second. But this is just going to spread a status effect that you have on your current enemy to a nearby enemy. What this build ends up doing is you kind of just chain a whole bunch of damage to enemies. So you'll focus one that's phase grasp, and then you'll end up inadvertently killing a whole bunch of other ones because you're chaining status effects. Your bullets are ricocheting with this talent, Indiscriminate, which we're definitely speccing into next. Amara's bullets that damage enemies have a chance to ricochet and deal decreased damage to nearby enemies. Ricochet, chance, and damage are increased if the target is currently affected by phase grasp. So when you phase grasp an enemy, you have a 60% chance of your bullets to ricochet, and it only is 25% less damage. So you're literally just doing, I don't know what the math is there, you're actually doing around like 30% additional just free damage all of the time, which is just absolutely insane because you're pretty much going to constantly be focusing your phase grasp enemy, and then everything around it is just going to get melted. Next thing we want to go into is Deep Well, just increasing the max size of your guns by 20%. This is by itself very strong. Another talent here is Catharsis. Whenever you kill an enemy with an elemental effect and they die, they explode. The damage on this is just pretty low, so I don't ever see a reason to spec into it. If you think otherwise, please let me know in the comments. I haven't done a ton of testing with this, but I have not been able to see it do a whole lot of damage. If this were, however, to do a decent amount of damage, I could see it pairing well with the build since we're just trying to blow everything up after killing one NPC. The problem though is that it has an internal cooldown of 8 seconds, meaning that you can't continually gain the benefit of it over and over again unless when you increase the ranks it decreases the cooldown. So, and that again, we're just going to go into another point of Wildfire. And here we have either Conflux or Sustainment. Conflux, whenever Amara applies a status effect to an enemy, she gains a chance to randomly electrocute, ignite, or melt that enemy. Usually enemies die pretty quickly. This is okay since you are going to be applying status effects to all the enemies around you pretty much whenever you phase grasp something. Oh, I should talk about this in a second, but I just don't think this does enough damage to really justify putting a lot of points into it, and we'd rather have the survivability from Sustainment. Now before I talk about Sustainment, we're going to talk about which augments you want. First off, you can either put it into Soulfire, or this pretty much just changes the element. More often than not, you want to just mix the elements, but it really doesn't make much of a difference because you're not really doing any damage with phase grasp. So if this is shock, fire, corrosive, doesn't really make a difference. The main thing here is that we're going to go for allure. This is going to create kind of like a nova or like a black hole. Whenever you phase grasp an enemy, it'll pull other enemies closer to it, which works fantastically with the way that we're trying to ricochet and spread all these status effects and do all this other stuff. Another thing that pairs super well with this is Ties That Bind. Amara summons a giant fist, being your phase grasp. It's going to burst from the ground, and it locks a targeted enemy in place, being Phase Grasp, and enemies near the grasp target are linked, and any damage dealt to a linked target is shared. So pretty much any damage that you do to the Phase Grasp enemy is going to just chain outwards to all of the other enemies nearby. 35% of the damage, so definitely would go for this. This is better than any of the other things in my opinion. I don't think this is worth it because you're pretty much just able to hit a ton of targets simultaneously and do a bunch of free damage. Eternal Fist is okay for mobbing, but I would much rather just focus on one enemy and just kind of kill everything in the process rather than, grasping one enemy individually over and over again. And Fist over Matter, in my opinion, the cooldown is way too long and it does not do enough damage to justify using it. The next talent we're going into, which is huge for overall survivability, Amara is just going to gain lifesteal whenever she deals elemental damage, and then when we're going to spec completely into this, 20% lifesteal of the damage that you're dealing. And obviously the damage that you're dealing is significantly more than the damage you're taking. So even just 20% of this, with the fact that you're spreading your status effects to other enemies and you're doing pretty much the majority of your damage via status effects, etc., you're getting a lot of lifesteal here, enough to where when I was doing Circle Slaughter and Mayhem 3, I didn't even notice me taking much damage at all. It was very strong. And then next we're going to go into Forceful Expression. Amara's gun deals extra elemental damage, 18% extra damage. Pretty obvious choice there. And then we're going to dip over from this tree and we're going to start going into the blue tree. First, I would go into 3 into Fast Hands, just increasing your reload speed. You can use this early on if you want to. 20% reload speed is pretty helpful, as well as the weapon swap speed. The mode switch speed, not as much, but the weapon swap speed and the reload speed is pretty decent. This talent, Do Harm, isn't going to help you because you aren't doing any damage with your Phase Grasp, so getting additional action skill damage is not going to help you. Could be potentially good for like a boss build, but obviously that is not what we're doing. We're just going to go into 2 into Violent Tapestry. Now, here's something that I am a little bit confused about, and one of you guys can maybe let me know in the comments below. But doing testing with these rush stacks, such as Alacrity or Do Harm or Violent Tapestry, I've been testing mainly Alacrity because on the face of it, they seem very good. Amara gains increased reload speed for every stack of Rush, and if you're using certain things, you can get a ton of stacks of Rush, potentially reducing your reload speed to near instant. So I tested this, and I gained no noticeable reload speed benefit. I tried to get my stacks, I got my stacks up to 99, I tried reloading, it felt just as fast. I tried killing an enemy, it was just as fast. I tried even using Phase Cast to try to quote-unquote consume the rush stacks. It reloaded just as fast. I don't know if this quite literally does not work. I am not sure at this point. But I did not notice any buff to reload speed after using this, so yeah, not sure how I feel about that. So we're just going to ignore Alacrity. Ideally, though, it would be really good, and I'm worried that Violent Tapestry might not even work because of some interaction with Rush stacks just not working. But my inclination is that Violent Tapestry should still work just fine, and this is just going to increase the effect chance of you applying status effects. Overall, pretty decent because you can get a lot of rush stacks pretty quickly, especially with a class mod that I'll get into in a minute here. So yeah, extra effect chance pretty much just boils down to extra damage. Next thing we're going to go into is 3 into Transcend. Amara gains increased accuracy and crit damage for a few seconds after activating her action skill. With Phase Grasp, you're activating it very, very frequently, meaning that you're gaining 27% crit damage pretty much all of the time because the duration is 12 seconds and your cooldown of your Phase Grasp is much lower than that. So you're able to get a lot of free damage and free accuracy. What I like to do is I like to Phase Grasp an enemy, walk up to them with the shotgun, and then just shoot them in the mouth, gaining all the extra damage from personal space and gaining all the extra damage from Transcend. And the accuracy is pretty nice as well. Obviously, we have a problem here. We are trying to get further down into the tree. Like I said, I think Do Harm and Alacrity are useless. Personally, I'm going into Restless just because I don't know how effective Violent Tapestry is and if it is even working, and just reducing the cooldown on my Phase Grasp just by a little bit is nice. If Violent Tapestry is working properly, though, I would probably prefer to go into this, as you can get a lot of rush stacks very quickly, meaning that getting upwards of 40%, potentially even much higher than that, additional chance to hit an enemy with an effect, that's very, very good. But again, I'm not 100% if it's actually working as intended. So we're also going to go into Ascendant here. I'm just going to put another point into Restless just to reduce the cooldown. This is actually maxed out, so then we have to go another point into here. And then now we can go 3 points into Wrath, which is going to increase our gun damage overall. And then it's also going to increase our damage after we use a Phase Grasp. So as you can see, this pairs very nicely with the way that we're setting things up is just these burst damage windows with Amara, where you just Phase Grasp one guy, murder it, everything around it gets murdered, and then boom, you have your Phase Grasp back up immediately. Next thing we're going to go into, you'd think that Laid Bare would be pretty good, as it's going to increase your damage by 8% after you use an action skill. From Rest is also very good. It increases your fire rate and charge time. The charge speed of this is pretty nice if you're using a gun like this, where it charges up. Charge speed can be really nice from that. Personally, I'm going to go into Laid Bare just to increase my damage, because you're getting this extra damage very frequently. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the build. You can definitely decide to only go all the way down to Ascendant. I forgot to talk about Ascendant. This is going to increase your allure radius by 100%, meaning that whenever you use your Phase Grasp and your Black Hole, more enemies are going to get sucked into it because the radius is larger. I would think this is probably one of the better talents here, but Transcend, Fast Hands, Restless, and if Violent Tapestry are working are all very strong. You could decide to completely ditch going further down into here, not going full into Restless, and then just deciding to go for more damage reduction over here, or even go for Samsara and get some additional damage through that. I honestly just don't think that it's worth going into this tree, because most of this is just, you know, survivability oriented and some of it's movement speed. But while you're leveling, you can definitely decide to just ditch going further into here and just get, you know, 3 here, 2 here, 3 here, and then boom, book it immediately down here. Put like 2 into extra max health, maybe go 3 into Samsara for additional damage and health regen, and then probably I would go into here for additional damage reduction, because you would pretty much have that up all the time. And then you could just go 3 into Vigor and like 2 into Mindfulness. That's also a very, very strong setup. You're just kind of prioritizing damage reduction at that point rather than getting a little bit of extra damage from Wrath. It's actually pretty good. I mean, 40% extra gun damage is actually really strong if you think about it. And Laid Bare, which is another 8% damage. But like I said, I went for the damage-oriented version of this, not the survivability-oriented version of this. In terms of weapons you want to use, pretty much want to use anything with a, you know, that's elemental, of course, and anything that has decent, you know, ticking damage from the status effect. But a few guns that are really good are the Crossroad. This just does a lot of damage. The Brainstormer is really nice, as it's going to make your tether even better, because this by itself just chains damage, so you're just chaining damage all over the place. This is super strong. The Cutsman's really good because, as you can see, the damage per tick is really strong. Any anointed gun that has on action skill and weapon status effect damage and chance are increased by 75% for a short time. This is pretty good. I've tried testing the anointed effect and I couldn't really notice a difference, but in theory this would be strong. But Crossroad, Cutsman, all really good. Rowan's Call is pretty decent. Lucian's Call, it's okay, not that good. If you have any other really good gun recommendations for Amara, please let me know. This is a good anointed effect here. The Burning Flacker is pretty decent, I noticed. In terms of class mod, I'm using Volatile, a Phaserker mod. A Phaserker mod, very good. This pretty much is just going to give you her max rush stack every time you use your Phase Grasp, and you also gain weapon damage and action skill cooldown rate based on the number of stacks, maxing out at 5, so you're getting 50% action skill cooldown rate and 15% weapon damage, which is pretty nice. Mine also has extra shotgun damage, which is really good when using my Brainstormer, and I get some conflicts there. The +2 to the health regen I don't think is worth it. I'd much rather have, you know, +1 to Anima here, or maybe +3 to the up close and personal thing if possible. +2 to Wildfire spreading is pretty decent, and maybe +1 to Violent Tapestry is okay. There's a lot of different things you could get here that would be really strong, but, you know, is what it is. In terms of relics, Electric Banjo is really good because it has a 20% chance per bullet to pretty much just chain shock damage around, which is very good, especially when using Brainstormer or just any gun, because with Brainstormer it has 14 pellets, so every pellet would have a chance to proc this. Pretty much every time you shoot, you would proc this, and it increases your shock damage, which you already want to be using shotguns because you're getting extra shock damage from Tempest here. So that's a really good relic. You can also use a relic where if you're taking damage from that same relic, you gain additional damage. Do I have one in here? I thought I had one, but it's pretty much whenever you take, it increases your elemental damage by like 180% when you're taking damage from that element. So you'd pretty much just nade yourself, gain, maybe you could use like a shock nade with that's impact, where you could just instantly hit yourself with it, nade yourself, and then boom, you have a ton of additional damage. And it doesn't even matter that you naded your shield because you have so much lifesteal from sustainment. In terms of shields, I'm using Transformer because it has a pretty big capacity and it converts 100% of shock damage into shield, which is really nice. And my nade, I'm just ignoring at the moment, but you can use like a shock nade. It's probably going to be really good with Amara because you're gaining extra shock damage, but obviously you'd use an impact nade or something if you were to have the right relic. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope that this video helped. I tried to be as informative as possible. Spent a decent amount of time testing on Amara, so hope that this helped you guys. I haven't seen a whole lot of decent Amara builds out there, so yeah, just want to make this video. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe for videos similar to this one. Follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/nick2, and follow me on Twitter at nick2yt. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Peace.